Hello everybody, I'm Cody.
I'm Eric.
And you're probably wondering why we have this beautiful machine here in front of us today. Well, this is episode 2 of Eye on Industry podcast. And today we're going to be talking about competition and why it is beneficial for the motorcycle market and the industry, and what helps drive and add technology to the bikes that we ride on the street, from the track to the street. And this is a prime example of kind of a performance build. So, you know, you hear from a lot of people that the Harley, you got the Harley and the Indian rivalry, right? Where it's just like, I hate Indian, I hate Harley. But truth is, Indian needs Harley and Harley needs Indian. It strives innovation and it makes them put out a better product. And the best way to do that is through competition and racing, which is why now they have King of the Batters, even though we, whatever with it. we kind of prefer the flat track racing side of it ourselves, but it is what it is. Eric, kind of go back to, you've been racing for a long time. What was the competition like back in the 80s when you was racing full time?
So the class structure is a lot different then than it is now. Ownership of the AMA was different, that sort of stuff. There were a lot of different classes that we rode. Okay, you started off as an amateur, and then you went to a pro-am, then you went to a junior, then you went to a pro or expert. Okay. As things changed in the AMA, they labeled it a little bit different, but for just argument's sake, that's pretty much how it went. There used to be a lot of participation. At that time, there wasn't the type of motorcycles that you see now. At that time, there were a huge amount of what's called framers, which is, this is an example here, which is a purpose-built frame. So if you wanted to go dirt track, there were a handful of places, we were one of them, that offered complete turnkey motorcycles, modern and vintage. But for the most part, you bought a chassis, you bought a power plant, you started buying wheels, bodywork, assembled it.
And when you say we, you're talking about your motorcycle shop, right?
Yeah, or just the participants in general.
Okay.
And so you progress through the ranks with this same procedure, from single cylinder racers to twin cylinder racers. The amount of people that participated was a lot larger then than it is now. There's a lot of gloom and doom as to why participation is down and that sort of stuff. I will say this, at the time that I rode, there were purpose-built race engines, okay? And the production street engines weren't as predominant as they are now. And there's mixed feelings about that. I liked the race-only motors. Honda had the RS 750, Harley Davidson had the XR 750. A lot different than the XRs that you're thinking of that are street bikes. So it's really weird that Harley would label a street bike as an XR when traditionally the XR was a race-only power plant. But now they have production twins. I would have liked to have seen the race-only and the production twins progress together. In some ways, I didn't like when they went to what's called the DTX bike. So the DTX bike is the lowered motocrosser. I think that it would have been advantageous to run framers and DTX bikes. There was a very short time that they did that. But to your point, all of that, whether it was suspension components, carburetor components, ignition components, wheel components, camshafts. At that time, there was no fuel injection. It was all carbureted, but there was a lot of carburetor technology that was pushed forward. So That, along with the other principles of racing, you had road racing principles, and you had motocross principles, and all of that, cross country, all of that added with the manufacturers to the technology that you as a consumer would have went to the showroom and purchased.
Right. So, what's some examples of like when you started racing flat track? You couldn't do much to change the bike. I mean, you really had to run kind of what was given to you from the factory. How much of that technology from then incorporated itself into the actual bicycle off the showroom floor?
Okay, so when we rode there was a change between 500 and 600 singles. Now,
Right.
so you got like a Rotax, or you might have gotten a Honda. Now, Honda had what they called the RS line, which was a little more of a race motor. Now, you were allowed to make a lot of changes as far as camshafts and carburetors and intakes and valve diameters, stuff like that, but you were limited to particular engine sizes. You were limited to a size with a certain amount of overbore. Now, when we rode Sportsters, the Sportster Performance Series, some of you people may remember that series. I actually liked that series. It was an affordable series, but for the most part, you went to the dealer, you bought a Sportster 883, and you took the lights off of it, and for the most part, that was it for the longest time. Now, later, we were allowed to change wheel sizes. We were allowed to change triple clamp widths. There were some body work changes, some exhaust changes. There were some carburetor changes, although we still had to run stock CV carburetors, but we could run a larger carburetor like was run on a Big Twin at the time. Later on, we got to change ignition boxes, stuff like that. That was stuff that was developed. A lot of it came to light through the racing of those particular motorcycles, and we got different ignition boxes and we got different oil pumps. There was just a lot of progression at that time that you pretty much wouldn't have had even through like a Screaming Eagle line.
Right.
Without that series. But they also road raced Sportsters. I never participated in the road race series for Sportsters. That was segregated, and we primarily just did the dirt track, which, if you compared that to now, roughly could be considered hooligan maybe in some ways. But
Right.
anyway, in a future episode, I still have both of my Sportster Performance bikes, so we can pull those out and we can kind of go over the development of how they started. We'll have a stock Sportster here, so we can show you a stock Sportster and then show you how the series progressed and developed, and everything from the chain conversions that you would run now. There was a lot of that was derived from us being able to change gearing, and there was a lot of shock technology. We had to run stock forks, but there was a lot of bolt-in fork technology
Right.
that came along and was developed. So that really helped. But it's not just in Harley Davidson that kind of progression happens. There's a lot of progression that happens in road racing. There's a lot of progression that happens in drag racing. There's a lot of progression that happens in particular Cup series where they kind of have to be exactly the same motorcycles.
Yeah, you can watch MotoGP and then like you watch that season and then you go next year to the showroom floor. Now you're not going to buy a MotoGP bike. It's never going to happen. But there's a lot of technology that are ran in those GP bikes that's tested through the racing through the year on the series that does trickle down eventually into the consumer market through a bike you buy. You know, you have your RR Zero Race replicas, and that's as close as you can get to a race bike without spending race bike money. You know, you have your normal sport bikes, then you have your super bikes, you got your hyper bikes, then you got your RRs, and so it's a way for them to test, because if it's going to break, it's going to break on the racetrack. Those bikes are ran max RPMs, the highest speed, the suspension's working. watch Isle of a Man, and you see what I'm talking about. That suspension is working overtime on Isle of a Man. And they'll take what they learn and better it for next season, and then maybe the following season that technology will actually hit the bike. And an example of that is actually Harley Davidson right now with the CVO, I almost say the ST, you guys probably think of the RR. I really don't want to get into the RR. I just want to go there. I don't want to be negative, so I'm just not going to talk about it. But the CVO ST model, they now have the bigger brakes. They now have the inverted front end. There's finally technology coming to these bikes. You're seeing performance parts actually finally coming to light with Harley Davidson. And I'm sure some people are thinking, well, okay, inverted front end, what's a big deal? Let's go back to Victory. Victory had inverted front ends and performance parts on their bikes over 20 years ago. And what Victory did, Harley Davidson is just now finally doing on standard on most of the Softails and of course the CVO touring bikes. I would like to see the inverted front ends and a little bit better suspension on your normal bikes, but it is what it is. And then that's like I said, the King of the Baggers. We don't watch it, but we understand the technology that's in it, and we're seeing that technology actually trickle down into these high-end bikes. So that's what we talk about when we say competitions. We're talking about is competition's good. If you go back and look at Harley Davidson, and this is nothing against Harley Davidson, it's just the truth. They're kind of the last ones to do anything innovation-wise. They'll let every other company out there do it first, and then they kind of sit back and wait and see what consumers think about those on those bikes, on those manufacturers, and then they'll eventually add it to their bikes. But Harley's always kind of done that. So that's why I was surprised when they released the Pan America, because they had that automatic adjust and reverse suspension for when you hit a stoplight, it'd go down, put your feet on the ground. That's a first. Actually, I think Harley's actually the first one to actually design that. I don't think anybody else had that yet.
There were some other tour bikes that had some options along that had the suspension that would raise and lower a little bit, but not to the degree of like the Pan America.
Right.
Like back to your point of like the inverted forks. So I can remember the very first motorcycles I remember ever seeing, especially as a teenager, that had inverted forks were KTM motocrossers, like the 125s.
Right.
Were some of the most competitive and intricately designed suspension pieces. Now there were other motorcycles that had inverted-ish looking like old Z50s. Any of you that are old enough to have owned any Z50s in the early 70s, they were kind of sort of hydraulically controlled, but they were inverted.
Right.
We can actually show that in another episode. But the inverted forks, to your point, the inverted forks are more rigid. They're larger at the top. They are in fact a little larger at the bottom. They're a little heavier. There's always a trade-off. Performance products in cars or motorcycles or pretty much anything is sort of like marriage. Or dating. There's always a huge trade-off. So we're going to trade rigidity for weight, okay? Arguably, we're going to have more valving capabilities, but again, we're giving up weight. Now, sometimes the fork diameter creates issues with turning radius regardless of how far you push the triple clamps out, which also increases wheelbase. So again, in order to have turning radius, sometimes we have to move the forks forward, so you'll see triple clamps that the V is farther out than like some of the sport bikes that they're a little more straight across. Mm-hmm. Okay? But on a big motorcycle like the Harley Davidson, let's face it, all of those huge motorcycles need a lot of stability in the front. There's a lot of weight up there, okay?
Especially the touring bikes with the speakers and the amp and infotainment system and
fairings and all that kind of stuff. So The bigger brakes on the heavier motorcycle and the larger forks obviously was a huge improvement for ride stability on that motorcycle. And whether it's the really expensive race replica or it's the more affordable line, they both have inverted forks. They both have larger brakes. I think that I would sacrifice some of the aluminum, gas tank, carbon fiber stuff for standard pieces just because of ease of maintenance and ease of replacement if something happened, okay? But there are people that want that particular motorcycle, and I think if people want that, I mean, Ducati has the V4 Panigales that are really expensive, and they're really neat motorcycles and are loaded with a lot of technology. So
You got the Yamaha R1M, which is loaded with, it's basically a super bike you can pick up for under $25,000, which is nuts. The BMW SRR 1000 RR, I think is what it is. That's a $35,000, $40,000 bike, and same thing. It's as close to a MotoGP bike you're going to get for the street without an actual MotoGP bike price.
yeah, and Michael Dunlop in the European TT series, for the most part, it's a super sport bike that they run. It may have a performance exhaust on it. It may have a little bit of different type of piggyback tuner because of what they're wanting to accomplish with the motorcycle. But for the most part, they took the lights off of it, put competition bodywork on it. There's a lot of bolt-on performance upgrades on it, but again, that's to cater it to the rider, which is something else that we should also do in the future, because I see a lot of people that buy a ton of stuff and they put it on this motorcycle and they're still unhappy with it.
Yeah, they do way too much too quick, and we definitely need to do an episode about a little bit goes a long way when you're changing stuff on a bike.
Yeah, change one thing at a time, not change it one thing and go down the street and back and then want to make another change. Ride it a little bit. Get used to the change. If you notice a change, where you feel the change, how you feel the change, cater it from there. A lot of standard motorcycles nowadays have a huge amount of tunability in the suspension in and of itself. We'll just pick suspension. You have compression, dampening, you have rebound dampening, and then you have preload settings.
You know, maybe we should do a episode where we explain and show how you do those adjustments. So a lot of people out there I don't think understand how to compression, rebound. A lot of people don't know what we're talking about. Maybe we should just show them what we're talking about, explain to why you do what you do. And
now, keeping in mind in a lot of these episodes, you guys that's already wanting to pound on your keyboards, everything that we're talking about is in a very general description. It's a very broad description. We're not trying to pigeonhole, we're not trying to pinpoint. The reason for that is we would have 4-hour episodes on one particular point we're trying to get across. So everything that we talk about, or like we're talking about the King of the Baggers, I follow it. It's motorcycle racing, so I watch it, but there's our guys again. You hear them? They like to share. So
all 200 horsepower.
all of it. All of it right. You saw it here, folks. All of it right there. They're not stingy. They like to share with everybody. So if there's something else, for instance, if FIM Speedway is on, or if I'm participating in something, if I'm going to DVR something, I'll usually DVR the Speedway, or I like European TT racing, so I will DVR that over King of the Baggers. I'm not against King of the Baggers by any sense of the word, but everybody has their preferences, and it's just not a huge interest of mine. Having said that, though, there is a lot of technology from that series, which has been out a little while, that is just now trickling into the mainstream motorcycles, which again is a prime example of what we're trying to get across. But if you watch Moto America, there's a lot of the older technology that a lot of the teams aren't testing and developing, that have made it to the mainstream market and have pushed a lot of motorcycles forward. Now, a few other things that you need to keep in mind is you have people that will complain about a particular motorcycle that they bought. Let's say that they had a motorcycle that was 4 years old, okay? And they wanted the new one, and they bought the new one. And there were changes to this new one over the old one that were perceived as better and improvements, okay? You have to keep in mind a lot of that stuff was catered to whoever the rider was at the time, okay? And their inputs, what they liked, what they didn't like. So in essence, you're kind of getting what they liked. As a particular rider, you may be lighter than they are, heavier than they are, taller than they are, shorter than they are. So there's some of those changes that may not fit you. And that's where you get, well, the old ones are better than the new ones. Well, depending on application. And I think that's another deal that you were wanting to cover today, was the importance of development in competition and then application of this development across the board in manufacturing.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to 1999 is when Harley stopped making the Evo, rest of the Evo. It's probably one of our favorite engines from Harley, if not our favorite engine from Harley. And it is for a lot of people. They came out the twin cam. Me personally, I also love the twin cam. I got 96,000 miles on my 96 cubic inch factory twin cam engine. I've rode the crap out of it. It's held up very well. So I'm also a fan of the twin cam. But if you look, so from 1999 all the way through 2017, well, if you want to be more specific, 2016 to 2017, they came out with the Milwaukee 8 for the touring bikes. But the Softails and the Dyna still had the twin cam in it. They didn't do any real Harley, well, actually they really didn't do, they changed the engine, and then I think 06 or 07 they came out with the 6-speed transmission. And that's about the only changes that they made to the Softail and the Dyna chassis all the way up until 2018, when they changed, when the Dyna got killed off and they completely changed the whole Softail suspension. They came with the Milwaukee 8s. If you looked at the time that this started happening, where they started really changing and upping the technology in the motorcycles, is the time that Indian really started coming on hot. So people are like, well, what about Victory? You know, I never understood why Harley didn't look at Victory as a competition. I personally loved Victory motorcycles. They were fantastic. I like the styling of them. To me, they catered more to the younger market, but they didn't sell as well as Harley's, and maybe that's why Harley really didn't feel like they needed to up their game against the Indians, because the Indians' technology is actually quite a bit ahead with their performance than what you could get from Harley Davidson at the time. And then when Indian came on board, and the first few years wasn't really anything major, but about the 4th or 5th year, Indian really started putting out some really nice quality bikes. You could actually watch it in front of your eyes. The fit, the finish, the paint, the technology, everything changed like almost overnight. It just got so much better. And all of a sudden, Harley's losing customers to Indian motorcycles. They're a nicer, smoother riding bike, handle better, more power. So they're like, uh-oh, we gotta do something. Competition is kicking up. It's kicking in gear. We need to do something. Here we are now with Milwaukee 8, the inverted front suspension, the bigger brakes, the water cooled, the technology. Now Harley always is focused on the touring bikes. So in 2014, they came out with Mount Rushmore, which was actually everything that Harley did on the Mount Rushmore project. I actually personally liked, with the way they redesigned the fairing for airflow. The limiteds, the ultra limiteds had water cooled for a change. They had the one lever saddlebag opening. They had the better infotainment system. I mean, it was a huge step in 2014 for Harley, but that they stuck with it and they never changed anything. And then Indian came on board about that time. And then I said, a few years later, all of a sudden, it's all changed. Now, if you go to a dealership and you look at the new touring bikes, You don't even have analog gauges. It's all digital. It's all this giant, I think it's a 12-inch screen, and
A lot of it, I think, is touchscreen now.
yeah, it's all touchscreen. It's giant screen. The Bytes ride really nice. Even the entry level Bytes ride really nice, and they're super comfortable to ride. And there's no comparison between them, the old touring Bytes. Now, you was talking earlier about how maybe you had an older bike and you don't like the new ones. I'm there for one reason. I ride a Dyna. When I hop on my Dyna and I start it, it vibrates, it shakes. I feel like I'm on something. These new bikes are so well balanced and so well designed that they've taken most of the vibration out of the bike. So I don't feel that connection with the bike anymore, if that makes sense, you know.
There's definitely a change in the market, what people expect, what they want. As motor technology's changed, you know, they've added counterbalancers, which obviously smooth the vibration of the engine out. On Harley Davidson, but also on other motorcycles, counterbalancing is nothing that's new. That's been done for a long time to smooth the motorcycle out, each impulse, the way that each cylinder hits that causes vibration. So there's a little more to it than that. Again, that's just kind of a general idea. But if you have an older motorcycle, and a lot of people fall into the, I don't want to spend any money on it because I won't be able to get my money back out of it. Well, if that's your deal, then save your pocket money, go buy a new one and play that game. But I own motorcycles. I have several motorcycles, quite a few. Some in my family might say to excess, but anyway. I build a motorcycle that I like, the way that I like it, and make improvements that I enjoy on the motorcycle. Now, as a rule, when I'm done with the motorcycle, if I'm done with one of them, market value is what market value is, and I get another one and I go again. I'm not one to deal with trade-ins. Here's the reality of a trade-in. There's a lot of misnomers about dealers breaking it off in you here, screwing you there or something. You got to keep in mind you have a motorcycle that you have catered to your liking, okay? And in essence, the dealer may have to change it, may have to sit on it for a considerable amount of time. If you own money on it, they actually have to pay that off in order for you to have a trade-in, which is going to reduce the amount of trade-in that you're going to be allotted.
Alrighty, sorry about that. The battery literally exploded inside my camera and I had to fish it out and replace it. I guess it's too hot in the shop for the camera, so
Might be.
anyway, I'll let you continue, sir.
Well, we were talking about the cost, initial cost, everything, trade-ins. So if you're going to go down the road of buying a bike, a lot of times it's better if you sell your motorcycle outright than you're going to get with a trade-in. But we can do an episode about that, maybe work with some dealers, talk with some dealers, some salesmen about that process to kind of walk people through that. But if you have a motorcycle that you've had, let's use your Dyna for example, okay?
One I've had for 15 years.
Exactly. And you go, regardless of the manufacturer, there's just either nothing that really trips your trigger or life happens. So financially, I like my motorcycle, I probably need to keep it, but I want to change it. Absolutely do that. Here is my advice as a shop owner though. Don't go cheap, inexpensive, because you won't like the end results. The quality of the parts don't last very long. They don't fit very well. Sometimes if it's suspension components, they don't actually work very well. But take the time to invest on yours. We updated the suspension on it, which made it a better motorcycle. Found components that were worn, and they wear at such a progression that sometimes it's such a slow downward progression that you don't notice it until one day you ride it and it just feels wrong. So we freshened up a lot of steering head bearings,
Yeah, so over the 15 years I owned my bike, I've invested just parts alone in the last 15 years. I'm about 20 grand. Now, you're probably thinking, holy crap, that's a lot of money. Well, look at the price of a new bike. I've already told you that, no offense to any of the new bikes out there, they don't do it for me. So for me, it's worth an investment to keep what I like going. So when I got the bike, it had big old 8-painters on it and forward controls. Where I'm from originally, that was pretty standard. Everybody did that with their bikes. And then through the years, I moved to Arkansas, and I rode my buddy Bryce's FXR, who had some pullback T-bar setup, and I just fell in love with it. And then I worked on a customer's 03 T-Sport, and that's really what settled me on the T-Sport. Is I just love the T-Sport, and trying to find one that's not roached out, that's not overpriced, is pretty difficult. So I went ahead and decided that I'm going to make me as close to a T-Sport as I can. So I changed out the rear suspension for some cheaper Burley 13.5-inch shots. I did progressive heavy duty front shots in it, and I did some different bars and a little quarter fairing. And for a while it worked, and then eventually I'm like, I'm not happy anymore, and it's time for a change. So then I always want a dual disc front suspension for braking. I ride it pretty hard, and I wanted a suspension that was reliable, didn't break the bank, and handled and did what I wanted. So we brought it in here. Now I've already had the chain drive done on it, and I've already gone with the rocket cam, a clutch plates, and a Hayden IMSIS chain tensioner, compensator eliminator, and tune-in-1 exhaust, and I got the bars, and I got the T-Sport fairing, and really the only thing left for me to do was the actual suspension part of it, and I need to rebuild the engine, but it still runs. And so I got with Eric, and we took a set of V-Rod lowers off of V-Rod that we weren't going to use, modify them to accept the stock Harley dampener, because the dampener rod is longer on the Dyna than it is on the V-Rod. Adapted all that together. I called Race Tech. Race Tech sent me out a kit with their old emulators, and we adjusted it to their settings and specifications. We put dampeners, preload adjusters in the top of it, and then we got a hold of Racing Bros, and Racing Bros sent out a set of 14-inch piggy bats, fully adjustable. And I've probably put 20,000 miles on these parts now, and I've packed. So 2 years ago, I did a 5,000 mile trip in 14 days, a moto camping trip with my bike was packed to the mats, and didn't skip a beat, handled great through all the twisty roads I handled. The brakes never failed, the suspension was spot on, and again, like he's saying, a little bit at a time. So this is progression over 15 years. Little by little I've been changing the bike, and now I'm getting older, I'm ready for shorter bars. It's getting to the point where the bars up tall are starting to become an issue with my hands falling asleep and whatnot. So now I know I need to drop them down, and I know that I want to rebuild the engine, but I'm not going to go crazy with it because I still daily ride it, and it's still my around town bike, my trip bike. It's everything. So not going to go crazy. High compression build. High compression builds don't usually do well on long road trips. They're not designed for that. And so yeah, so in the future we will be doing a video on an engine twin cam rebuild, but that's probably a year from now or so. But a little bit a long ways goes a long ways. So initially we put the suspension on, and then I went and rode it. I put about 100 miles on it, and I came back and we sat down and talked, and we did some preload adjusters on the front. I went back out and rode it. I came back and I got the front end dialed where I wanted it. The next was to do the rear suspension. Now it had low speed adjustment, high speed adjustment, compression. It had a rebound, and then it has one more adjustment. I can't remember what it was, but it's 5 different adjustments on this one shock. And so that took a lot of fine tuning and a lot of, I think it took about 500 miles for me to get that really tuned into where I need it to be. But man, it's great. It soaks over the bumps really nice. I can whip it in the corners. I got a lot of ground clearance, and it's a lot of fun to ride now. And before, it was getting real boring to where I was considering selling it and going to a different bike. But I looked like what Eric was saying, sometimes the pros and the cons, you gotta weigh your pros and cons. Bike's paid off. Do I want a bike payment? Bike payment eats into my money I put into a vacation fund every month so I can go on my big 14-day vacation. Do I want to have to deal with having to customize and rebuild another bike that fits me? Because there's no bike out there that I can sit on stock that fits me. Now, I'm not talking about exhaust, I'm not talking about lights, I'm talking like physically nothing out there that is currently made I sit on stock that I really truly love. Maybe the Indian Challenger is probably the closest thing I can sit on that I fit comfortable on, probably ride across country without doing any changes on it. But is that the only bike? And that's saying a lot. There's a lot of bikes out there.
I would say that at the point that you can still buy components for your motorcycle, I think that I would continue to own it if you liked it. And again, buying parts along, making small changes is always less expensive than purchasing a brand new bike. And like you said, insurance is higher, tags are higher. There's a lot of expense there. Sometimes to each his own, because sometimes it is time. It's just time. If you have a particular motorcycle that is getting difficult to buy components for,
I have one. Actually got two.
Yeah, then maybe that drives a person to get a newer one.
So, you know, so I will occasionally ride a newer bike. I'm like, this is really nice. It handles nice. It's comfortable. I like the new technology. I like that it has cruise. I don't have cruise. You know, there's stuff out there that I like. But again, I'm like, it's not worth it for me to go out and get a new payment for a new bike when I already have one that is currently reliable enough to ride. But you know, if you are just really to the point where you're like, you know what, today's the day for a new bike, I encourage you to go out and talk to the salesman and look at different bikes, do your research, and compare different bikes and reliability. And I encourage you to really, really, really need to ride the bike. I'm not talking hop on the bike, go ride it for a mile or two, and then come back. You really need to go ride the bike for 10 to 20 miles minimum if the dealership will let you. If you are very serious about buying a bike, most dealerships will let you ride a bike. And you have to be willing to ride a bike to know if you're making the right choice. And I think if I was financially out of debt and not paying off my credit cards, I'd probably have a new bike sitting in my garage.
I've thought about new motorcycles. I've looked at a lot of different brands and styles of motorcycles. There's a few that fit what I'd like to do with the motorcycle, which is another important thing also, is are you capable of getting past the flash and you're out with your buddies and they have puppy love for this or puppy love for that, so they've got like this newlywed kind of thing going on. Can you see through all that to actually pick a motorcycle that you like? Now you're wondering, why are you bringing that up? Well, every single day I have customers that come in and they have purchased something and they've owned it 6 months.
Sometimes less than that, but yeah.
And then they don't like it. And they don't like it in a way that is not changing the handlebars or changing the seat or something like that. Now I do have customers that buy new motorcycles and at first they thought it was fine, but later on the handlebars are too far away from them and we need to bring the handlebars back to them a little bit, or the seat is a little too squishy and they're not comfortable, so we need a seat that the padding's has a little more support in it. Sometimes the seat's like really tall. If you'll notice some motorcycle seats, the seat padding in the seat's actually really tall. So Do we need to buy another seat? Do we need to find an upholsterer that can address that for us?
Yeah, so let's touch seats just briefly for seats, and we need to really finish this up. But I personally have 3 different seats for my Dyna for 3 different types of riding I do. I have my normal seat that's on the bike 95% of the year. And then I have a custom seat that's for like if I want to show the bike. And then I have my actual touring seat that literally has a backrest built into it when I take my big 5,000 mile trips. And some of those days I'm doing 800 to 1,000 mile days. I'm riding pretty hard straight through. And it's an actual touring seat. I know that I can't tour 1,000 miles on my daily seat. I can probably do a few hundred miles a day and be okay, but not 1,000. That seat looks better, but it doesn't perform the way I do. It pushes me a little bit further back. I'm a little bit more lower on the ground. It's a little bit more, for my position, it's nice. The touring bike, it raises me up. It's a wider seat, brings my legs a little bit further out, but my back doesn't hurt on long trips. And that's what's more important, is I can actually get off the bike, walk without bending over, holding my back, and feeling like an old man. And you know, another thing we hear a lot of is that, well, I bought this bike because my buddy bought a bike and I liked it. So let's use a street glide and road glide for an example for Harley Davidson.
Okay.
So I personally, if I'm gonna go buy a new Harley, it's gonna be either the road glide or a lowrider ST. My dad is opposite. He wants the street glide. He loves the street glide. I don't like the street glide. I don't like having all that weight on my handlebars trying to move it around attached to the front forks. The road glide's a frame mounted fairing front. The front fairing's frame mounted. So it's like this. It's a normal bike. You don't have all that weight to push around the front end. Street glide, everything's attached to the front fork. So when you turn it, the fairing moves, and I'm an aggressive rider, and I can't get aggressive with that kind of bike. Also, the problem with street glides is the handlebar selection. You're very limited on the handlebar selection just because of the way the fairing's designed. It's not that it's a bad bike. For me personally, I already know there's no handlebars I can get factory or over the counter that is going to make it comfortable for me to ride that bike. It's just not going to happen. But I know that the road glide, I can get about any kind of handlebar I want, and I'm not going to make that bike fit me to a T perfect, which is why I would pick the road glide. So just because your buddy gets the road glide doesn't mean you're going to love the road glide. You actually may fit better on the street glide, or you may fit better on a little bit smaller bike like the Lowrider ST, which is like the smaller touring bike. Again, this is why I come back to, you need to go ride motorcycles. If you're seriously about buying a bike, you need to go ride it. Don't buy what your buddy's bought just because your buddy's got one. Go get what fits you. Otherwise, you're not going to be happy. You're going to be upset. You're spending more money to make a bike more comfortable for you, and it's taken away again from your vacations. And so, you're talking about vacation. If you're not comfortable on your bike, you're not enjoying your vacation. You're not enjoying what the bike is made to do. And that's to be, when you ride a bike, you should be away from all the stress. You should be able to kick back, relax, free your mind, and just ride. And if you're in pain, or if you're worried about something, or if you're upset because you're not happy with your purchase, you're not enjoying what the bike, why you bought the bike to begin with. And we see that a lot.
Yeah, and I would also say that whether you're fixing a motorcycle that you currently own, you're going to go down that road, or you're going to go down the road of a new bike, either way, you should explore options. You should not get stuck on a particular brand. There are a lot of brands now. I would say with components, I would stick with mainstream brands. Usually the product is a better product. There's a lot more technical support. If you run into issues, it's just a better road. Now, when it comes to motorcycles, just because your buddy bought, like, let's say you bought a Gullwing, okay? Well, a Gullwing may not fit you. Gullwings are pretty wide and they're pretty heavy and stuff like that.
They're very what's the word I'm looking for? The aftermarket scene for a Goldwing is very, 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 very minimal. You can't do
Yeah.
much with them. You're pretty much stuck with what you buy from Honda with the Goldwing. There's just not a high aftermarket option for them out there.
Which is wild, because at one time there used to be just tons of stuff for Goldwings, and it seems that sometimes the Japanese do this, that they will start to offer what the aftermarket world made, and so after a while they continue to add components and add components and add components, which could be good because you're going to buy a motorcycle maybe that's outfitted the way you wanted it to outfit anyway. But like the Goldwing is a little on the heavy side. Let's say you go to the BMW. Well, sometimes BMWs are a little tall. Again, both fine motorcycles, but maybe the BMW is a little tall for you. You might go to Kawasaki. You might go to any of the big four by meaning all of the Japanese manufacturers. Maybe, maybe not. You find something in there. Could be Yamaha with their Starline. Maybe that fits you. Okay.
You got Kawasaki with the Vaquero.
Yeah.
So then you go into the inline bikes, and then you go into the V-twin bikes. So I had the ability, Eurotech let me ride the BMW K1600 GT. That is BMW's like version of the Goldwing. It's kind of a badger. Without a doubt, the most smoothest bike I've ever ridden in my life. Crazy smooth and amazing power. But the power didn't kick on until later. So it kicks in about 3,000 to 4,000 RPM, and then it pulls to red line. While the Vaquero from Kawasaki, that power is going to kick in within about 1,800 to 2,000. It's going to kick in more quicker. It's going to pull harder off the line to start out with. Now, it's not going to be as nimble as the K1600, but the aftermarket scene's better for the Vaquero. So there's different bikes perform different ways on both handling, braking, performance, acceleration, top speed. They're all different. You really got to go ride them.
Yeah, and I would say that it's more important to forget numbers. Concentrate more on where this motorcycle makes its power and where it makes especially a lot of peak torque. A lot of people get consumed with horsepower, and for the most part street riders use torque more than they use horsepower, okay? And it's more important to have a torque curve that fits your riding over maximum RPM, maximum horsepower at high RPM, because most of the time where they make all of their maximum power is at a high RPM range that you very rarely get to anyway. And people say, well, I'm trying to get on the highway, or I'm trying to do this. You're still way away from the peak red line, and usually most of that's within the last 500 to 800 RPM of the RPM range to begin with. So find something that fits you, how you use the motorcycle. The motorcycle fits obviously your pocketbook, right?
Pocketbook.
Yeah.
And buy the correct bike for what you're trying to achieve. And this is going to upset some people, and I see them coming now.
I can hear the
I don't care how much horsepower your Harley has or your Indian, it will still get gapped by a 600cc piece of crap, zip tied, held together sport bike. And the reason I say is because it was designed to go fast. Harley was not designed to go fast, nor is an Indian. You can put all the power you want, you still gotta get to the ground. And you still gotta be able to handle it. If you get into a situation where you're going 100 plus miles an hour in a Harley and you gotta get out of the situation quickly, you're less likely to avoid the catastrophe than if you were on a sport bike. Two different design bikes. And like I said, I see them now, like my bike will gap, I don't care. We've been doing this way too long. I know what a stock 600cc bike will do. That's the R6. I know what to do stock. And I know how much power it takes to make a Harley even come somewhat close to that.
Sometimes people get obsessed with that.
Yeah.
And it kills the reliability, it kills the street ability. You have problems buying gasoline for it. They buy gasoline, they don't buy a gasoline that is high enough octane or high enough quality, and they detonate it. Through detonation, they kill pistons and they kill cylinders and they bend rods, and it's endless as to what happens. Where they've built this monster that they can't use anyway. They can talk about it at bike night, but as far as it being a comfortable motorcycle to use and an effective motorcycle to use, it's not.
No,
It's
no,
not at all. They're miserable, and then they come in and they talk about how they've run into somebody on a message board somewhere, and if I make up a name, it'll be somebody's name, and then somebody will be mad. So we're not going to make up any online names, but anyway, they give out this bunk advice. We just need to tune it here, tune it there. Look, camshafts are made to work within specific RPM ranges, and engine sizes are also have a whole lot to do with picking carburetors and picking camshafts, and there's a lot of engine packages that people make up and they want to buy stuff and they don't work well together. So
well,
mild is always better and reliable is always better, and I promise you, you will have more success and enjoy the motorcycle more with mild to moderate improvements than radical improvements.
yeah. I mean, if you really want to go fast on a Harley, then go build one. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do with it? Eventually, it's just going to get you thrown in jail. And here's what I get with, I don't understand why you spend so much money. Well, so I've heard this before in the past. Well, you don't understand, Cody, because the more power you have, the better it is. The better it is for riding and passing a semi or passing on a truck. My 96 cubic inch, worn out twin cam, fully loaded down with all my camping gear, my tent, my leather jacket, everything. I'm 220 pounds. I've never had an issue passing anybody. That's just an excuse. I can go ride a stock Yamaha R1 and it'll do 90 to 100 miles an hour in first gear. It'll take 5 gears to get your Harley to do that. That's what I'm saying. If you want to build a Harley to go fast, then build a proper, true Harley designed for the drag strip to go fast. This is where I'm coming from with this.
Yeah, and understand that you're gonna lose fuel mileage. A lot of people call and they complain that they want something rejetted or remapped, and I ask them if they're having issues, and they say no, it runs perfectly fine. So I ask them what we're trying to look for, what we're trying to accomplish, and they're like, well, it's the fuel mileage. Well, you made the motor bigger, and you made the camshaft bigger, and you put bigger injectors in it, and we have a larger fuel map. The reason why we have the larger fuel map is to accommodate the larger camshaft and the larger engine size and the larger intake on it. That's the nature of the beast. You took a motorcycle that made this much horsepower and got this kind of fuel mileage. We've made it build more horsepower, which is what they were after.
Yeah, but then they're not happy with the torque off the line.
Sometimes the camshaft doesn't work until a higher RPM, so they're upset that around town they go to give it gas and it's sluggish up to 3,500 RPM or 3,000 RPM. Some of them like have a narrow band that they build power in. They may not build power till 4,000 RPM. And somebody's told them, well, it's just not tuned right. You go tune it on the dyno and it'll go from curb idle up. Well, it's not going to happen. Or if you pick a camshaft that works with a motor package, large or small, that works at a lower RPM and produces way more torque, which is what you're going to use anyway on a street bike, then they complain because the motor gets flat above 6,000 RPM or 6,500 RPM. Well, the camshaft was designed to work at a lower RPM and to build more torque. Primarily, usually motorcycles that are designed to build big power, that usually comes from RPM. Whenever you turn those kind of RPMs, you're going to lose power off of the bottom. So again, it's a trade-off. What are you looking for? When you spend this money, spend it wisely and truly consider what you're wanting to do with this motorcycle. Whether you buy a new bike and you're going to spend a bunch more money on it, or you have a motorcycle that you enjoy, but it's time to change it. It's time to make some updates, some changes. I say do your homework, invest wisely, and talk to a lot of the manufacturers themselves, and a lot less of tuner person, whatever, that beats on his keyboard where he's in his mother's basement eating Hot Pockets.
So yeah, where he's coming from here, and this is just simple, basic advice. Go to whoever it is you want to build your engine. Doesn't matter who it is. Just go to them. If they do not ask you why you are picking these parts out and why you want to build this engine like this, you need to go someplace else immediately. That is an unexperienced engine builder, doesn't know what the hell he's doing. A proper engine builder and a proper dyno guy is going to ask you some simple, basic questions. What are you trying to achieve? Why do you want to change it? Do you do a lot of in-town riding? Are you going to be doing a lot of ripping around twisties? Are you taking to a racetrack? You're going to be doing a lot of two-up riding. How hard do you ride? These are questions that an engine builder and a tuner should be asking you, so that they can guide you to picking out the correct parts that's going to suit your needs and your wants. I see it all the time. Guys will listen to a YouTube video of a cam, like, that sounds really good. They put it in their bike and they're not happy with it. Well, yeah, because it's not suiting your needs.
Yeah, I give a lot of customers that buy camshafts that the camshaft was designed for an engine that's 20 inches bigger than what they have. So the camshaft is extremely too large for this engine. So money's money. Money's hard to come by. Once you've invested this money, you have labor, you have shipping, you have the cost of the components. We're buying more components, we're changing stuff. Take the time to do your research and invest wisely and enjoy your motorcycle. And as far as resale goes, like we were talking before, look, are you going to enjoy your motorcycle now? When you're done with it, it brings what it brings. If you can't accept that, maybe you should do something different. Or maybe you shouldn't change your motorcycle at all.
Yeah, rule of thumb. So I did sales for Harley for a little while. And the rule of thumb is you would get an average of about 10% of what you put back into the bike. So I don't care that you spent 60 grand on a big wheel Badger. You're not getting a $60,000 trade-in. You don't get the average trade-in plus a little bit extra. And that is what it is. It sucks, believe me, I know, because my dyno, I got a lot of money into it, and I know I'll never get out what I got into it. If I ever try to sell it, just not, I already know up front. So that's another thing. How long are you going to keep the bike for? Are you going to keep it for a couple of years and turn around and sell it? If so, don't invest a lot of money in parts, because you will lose on the back end. Do what you need to do to make the bike comfortable and enjoyable for you for those 2 years. But don't go overboard, or you're going to keep the bike for a long time like I have with my bike. And that's different. Little by little, upgrade it to where it is the coolest bike at bike night, you know. So just some food for thought for you all out there. If you have any questions, if you want us to cover anything, don't be afraid to put it down below, and we'll discuss it and think about if we can cover it or not. I mean, between Eric and myself, we have a lot of experience and a lot of years of fabricating, racing, building, riding. I mean, we've done it. We've been in the industry a long time, and if I don't know anything about it, he probably does. And if we don't, I'm sure he can find somebody that does.
I have a lot of connections in industry, so if there's something that you'd like to see, you have questions or something, post it below. Let us review it. We'll see what we can come up with.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask us questions. And you guys just keep riding safe and enjoy your ride. And until next time, thanks for checking out the channel. And we'll see you next week. Ride safe.